the size of this room is what a general store would have been. So imagine that's a huge store. They became wealthy. He's buying up the land, or he's also kind of the pseudo bank. He's making loans. He is a scrupulous business dealer, though, too. He will foreclose on farms if people do not make a payment to him. He gets 2,000 acres. By today's standards, that is still a huge farm. Yeah. He needs workers. He's a mercantile person. He does not want to be a farmer. So he gets immigration. There's a lot of immigration in the late 1800s coming here into the U.S. He convinces them to come, and what he does is he says he's going to pay them $1, but it's the script. So it's only the store that they can spend it in. Okay. It's the second generation that spends the most time here in this room. That is Eliza Jane. She was the original matriarch of the family. We talk about them being Irish Catholic, which is unusual because there's a lot of Lutheran Scandinavian here. So they would have masses here, and then the kitchen. What we talk about that is the kitchen ended up being more of not the family in here. They would hire one of the farmhands' wives, and this is where the farmhands could come for their meal if they were taking meals. You have to heat the water, all that kind of stuff. And the dad, typically, it goes from the dad down. And remember, the dad's the one out in the field, so he's the dirtiest. And then it goes down to the baby. So that's where they talk about like that adage of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's where they think it really comes from, because that water gets so grody by the end. Yeah. So. Also, the other thing I like to highlight in here is, like, are you familiar with like ice chests and things like that? Like how you would have, okay, so we have like the ice chest here. They would have gotten their ice. And then the other thing I like to show people, though, because I've never seen one anyplace else in the world, and I love to travel, and I've been lots of places, is that is an industrial butter churn. The blue box there, it's missing its handle. But we know that they made extra butter here. They had a herd of 15, which for that time period was a huge herd of cattle. They made butter, got it onto the train, because the train went, basically, if you see the tree line, that's where the train went. Okay. So they were close, but close doesn't count in the 1860s, because you still got to get a wagon and get it there. But he had his farmhands get it to what is Wyckoff now. If you saw that town there, that was not a town. That was just a stop for the train to get water at that point. They call them pop-up towns, because people want to live by the railroad, so towns pop up around places like that then again. And he could get his farm produce up to that spot, get it on the train. He sold it all up in the cities. He got the cash, but then still is only paying his people that script. So the people are stuck here. The workers are stuck because you can't take things with you, because your only mode of transportation that those people probably had were their feet. So it's only what you can carry on your back that you can go again. So they don't want stuff. They want cash, but they get here, they get stuck, and they can't get out.
So were they pretty unhappy here, I would assume?
It was a very common business practice for the time, though. So most workers don't know the difference. That's why, though, like if you really do study history, like our farmers that came here were homesteaders, and they came from sustainable farms of 5 acres. That's basically enough to feed your family of 14. But so you're surviving. That's what you are. They now have 35 acres of land here that they can also put their produce on the train and sell it. So I call our first farmers our beginning of our middle class. It's the first group of people that start having disposable money in the United States. You have all the people that, like living in the big cities of Chicago, New York type thing that we're sending all this produce to, but they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're seeing these farmers prospering, and that's when you start getting the spring of unions happening of like, wait, we don't have to live this way. Like, our work is just as important as what the farmer's doing, and how come our bosses get to live in these McMansions that they have and all the Gilded Age that we talk about. We want a share of that profit, and that's when you get the unionization happening then too.
So was the ultimate demise that there never was a railroad, or?
The ultimate demise here is the railroad didn't come. It was because of the grade. The railroad wants to stay on flat land. It's faster, cheaper, and easier to run your railroad on flat land than here. And then what happens is they leave. So the second generation that lived here the longest of this, he had married a gal from Preston, which had been the hotty-toddy town of the area because the railroad went there. They bribe her to come down here, basically. They build on parts of the house here because the town is pretty much dead. It's just them and the farmhands down here at that time. But Thomas is the second richest man in southern Minnesota. And women had very little prospects in the late 1800s except to marry well. You just didn't have many other. So she married well but was stuck on the farm, type thing. But in 1905, Preston, Minnesota got electricity again. And she's just like, we are out of here. And the house is still standing there. It's a big, beautiful, 3-story white wood house there in Preston.
Oh, really?
And Thomas became a bank president there. They kept the farm going for about another year and a half, but then he just decided, I'm closing the store. There's not enough profit going into it because farming got easier because you needed fewer men because of the steam and that kind of stuff. Sears catalog killed them is the other reason. And so he closes the store. The store and office are vacant for 60 years. Thomas came down here for about another 10 years and used the house kind of like a cabin, just to get away from Preston and the rat race. But he dies in the 30s. He had tried to sell it to the state as a state park, but it's too close to the Depression. His kids rent it out to farmers. They get in a dispute. The daughter wins the legal battle. It goes to the Minnesota Supreme Court even. She works with the group in Spring Valley, and then it becomes a state park in the 60s. And then we took it over about another decade and a half later because the state park doesn't really deal with buildings. They deal with land, not buildings.
And there were none of the poor people's houses left over, basically.
Because for a couple of different reasons. One is nails are very expensive at that time, and if you sold your property and the person really just wanted the land but not your house or your buildings, you burnt them down, and then you went through the ashes and picked out your nails because they are such a commodity. It takes a blacksmith about 5 minutes to make a nail.
Yeah.
So the granary that's out there, the interior structure of that it was built without a single nail. You can build, the Amish still do it today. It's like a peg and post. You can build the interior of a structure without a single nail.
That's cool.
So that's part of it. The other part of it is when the state park got it in the 1960s, early 1960s, there were other buildings still standing. But because it took 15 years for us to take it over, those buildings, in that 15 years, declined enough that they were not worth saving. So there's a lot of ruins and foundations around here, but not buildings then. Yeah.
It's do you think they're basically log cabin type of things? Little...
They were a little bit better than log cabins, but they're still, the office that you went through, that's the size of houses back then. So yes, there are 40 houses over there, but they're the size of a room, type thing. That's the size. But they would have basements, though. They had basements in them. And you typically would have a sleeping loft in them. So it's like New York City studio apartment, bigger than some of those, even though right now, because some of those are getting the size of a closet. But that's basically how you're living a studio apartment type life with a sleeping loft with your 12 children. Yeah.
Because it's kind of hard to not get a skewed view of hey, they're actually living okay when you see this mansion.
Yeah. So they're living, the Means are doing great.
That's who I want to be.
But they're doing great off the backs of their workers. Yeah. So, and that's what when you talk about the Gilded Age, that's what the Gilded Age is really about, is you have people that make all the money from the people that are working and typically surviving paycheck to paycheck. Then that truly is what the Gilded Age was. Yeah. And like I said, and that's why you had the riots and things that started to happen because unions came in and the barons did not want those unions because that was taking away from their profits. But the workers were we're going to shut down, and that's where you'd have the total shutdowns, and then the barons would have to give in and pay their workers, an extra dime, type thing. But a dime back there was a lot, type thing, But you had negotiations happening instead of just being told what you were going to get paid.
So you mentioned they moved into a house in Preston. Is that still there, and is that preserved? It is still standing
there. It is it's in private hands. Okay. It is, yeah. So it's never been. It's just, as far as I know, it's only had the two owners that Thomas technically it would have been just Thomas because women were not allowed to own anything at that point either. That's why he had to marry well. But he did die before her, so somewhere along the line it would have gone, well, it might have even gone into her son's name instead. I mean, women just were not allowed to own things. The only territory state that allowed women to own land at that time period was South Dakota. And then Wyoming eventually did. And then, but even like, I mean, it goes, I'm old enough that like I never had, like as a kid, I remember this. My sister, who was 10 years older than I, remembers this. She could not get a credit card when she couldn't have her own bank account. Our dad had to sign for her. Because women up until like about the mid 1960s were not allowed to have a bank account. You couldn't go get an apartment without having a man sign for you. Like, you know, so that's what we talk about. We get discouraged when like you have people now going like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, wait, it's like your grandmothers did not have, like you're giving away these rights that they were out in the street trying to get, you know, type thing. That it's like, but you don't know it because you've known nothing different, you know, but it's like, and we don't teach that history. You know, that's a history you might get in a museum here or there, but it's not, you know, in the school's histories, it's not that kind of thing.